Is this book really better than How to Win Friends and Influence People? I think it's not just once, it's not twice, it's not three, it's quadruple. Quadruple. Do you understand how much that is? 1, 2, 3, 4. Quadruple as good as How to Win Friends and Influence People. Now, I mentioned this when I was reviewing and analyzing the How to Win Friends and Influence People book, that it was really old and it was written in the 1950s. This is like the modern day version of How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's so good in any application. I don't know why they called it TED, and I think that's probably why it's not as popular. I hear so many YouTubers talk about How to Win Friends and Influence People, big ones, and like they kind of just, I feel like they copy it off each other, if it makes sense. I guess I did it in a sense too, but this book, you always have to look for something that relates to you, and this book was so good, and it was written super recently, almost the middle of 21st century. That's crazy, bro. Be grateful you're alive, bro. I'm grateful. Super grateful. We got our knowledge that we can absorb. Like we're the smartest generation out of any generation yet. Right off the bat, this is why this book tops off How to Win Friends and Influence People, because I was always looking for this word when I speak. It's like you're kind of confident and you're also like fearless. What is that word? What's that concept that makes you kind of be a good speaker? It's passion. It's passion. It's being passionate. And this is what this book talks about. The first chapter, we have being passionate. It is so important to be passionate. So I'll give you an example, really cool, in terms of girls. So how would you use that? And you can use this in any realm, but this is just a very good example. So recently, maybe a few weeks ago, I had an encounter. So I was cold approaching. Now I don't recommend doing that. I wasn't cold approaching. I just happened to pursue a cold approach because it was a very, good looking girl. Like the cards just fell right. Sometimes it works. So you're like, I got a cold approach. So I was sitting in a class, EMT stuff, and there was a girl, she was like going into med school, and she was very good looking. So I usually don't do this because, as a guy, you just progress, and then there's certain levels. As you expand, you find better girls, and the girls you like, they kind of fall, second hand. And same with the girls, It's not just guys. Like there's, as a girl gets hotter, or if she is already hot, she doesn't like talk to some guys who are below her. So as a guy, you can always upgrade. Like girls, it's got makeup and stuff, they can upgrade. But as a guy, if you upgrade your realms of human endeavor, of like, physicality, wealth, your spiritual, spiritual knowledge, and languages, you learn more languages, and you just move up, the dominance hierarchy. But anyway, so that's off the topic. So what happened is, I'm trying to she's really good looking, and apparently I heard that she's from Bulgaria, which I didn't know, and I'm like, oh, that's crazy. And then later it turned out she wasn't from Bulgaria, but I'll get to that in a second. So what I'm doing is, I go ahead, and what I do is, after the class finishes, and I talk to her a little bit. So she kind of paid attention to me, because also, again, I'll talk about charisma is a big thing, but as I'm sitting in a class, a lot of guys, they don't have this concept of dushko. And I talked about this to my dad in Dagestan. We were discussing, some dushko is your spirit of fearlessness. It's like heart. Dusha means spirit in Russia. So dushko is your spirit of the heart. So, being brave and being courageous. There's a big guy. If he doesn't have dushko, he's gonna be scared of some little guy. This guy, he's gonna be scared of some little guy beating him up. The guy, what's his name, Bratton Marley? Yeah, I think, but he basically goes and he interviews fighters, and he's a big guy, he's muscular. And he's like, yo, what would happen if, I get in a street fight with you or some stuff. But, this guy, he's big, but he doesn't have a lot of dushko. So, the little guys, just because, even if they're not as big as him, even if they didn't do any MMA, if they're not scared of him, and they'd be like, yo, what the fuck, man? Salam alaikum, bro. What do you want from me? So it's intimidating to the big guy. Now, I'm not saying if you're big, you can't have dushko. This is what I want to work on personally, is being big and being courageous as hell. So then, I noticed her, she noticed me, just we both saw each other, look at each other. And as we're getting out, it's the funniest thing, you could put that in a 3D camera. So she's this sheep. And she noticed a tiger, who's me, a Siberian tiger. Because girls are usually more intimidated. So she's trying to get out of the classroom, because she is feeling the tension a little bit. And then she jumps off her, like, oh, she doesn't jump off. She gets off her, seat. She starts going to some other girls. They start talking about, the stuff that we covered. And then me, I just stand up. And I'm like this line, like, roar, like, and so. And I'm about to chase down this, like, sheep. And so she gets off. And she's walking through the door. And I start, like, walking, making my way slowly and surely towards the sheep. And then she notices me, and so she tries to flock with the other sheep, because that's how they get stronger. So she's like gossiping with the girls, but then the girls disperse. So now she has absolutely no outlet. She's screwed. And Rustam, the tiger, is gaining miles on her. And so, it wasn't that bad. I'm kidding. But like, as I'm going to get her, I found a good moment. But what I'm talking about is, the reason being here is, as I got to her, and we finally, I introduced myself, she introduces me, I'm like, hey, are you from Bulgaria? She's like, no, I'm actually from Hungary. She's Hungarian. I mean, it's similar, you can't blame me, like, don't blame me for that. But I was saying, yeah, I'm Russian, blah, blah, blah. And the thing is, now is where a lot of guys get lost. So they're like, well, how the hell, what am I supposed to do now? Like, do I just say, hey, can I have your number? Like, no, don't do that stuff. It's so garbage, bro. Please don't do those stupid, never do pickup lines, and never do those basic, like, can I have your number? It can be. You guys are freaking geniuses. You're smarter, you're intellectuals, you're a human species, especially the guys who watch this stuff. Make it a little bit more creative, Don't just be like, hey, can I have your number? Be like, some other thing, unless you're high level, of course. Like, make it more interesting. Obviously, if you're a millionaire, you can just say, oh, give me your number. Like, but that's just obvious. Like, don't just be like, I want your number in order because I think you're hot. Like, say, like, find some other characteristics in her and play off of those characteristics. I guess some people consider it being like a pussy move, but it's just more smoothly and naturally, because it's less explicit. Like, girls, the first thing they want to know is that you can keep your hands to yourself. Because if you're just like, yo, let's get your number because I think you're hot, well, she's like, he just wants to fuck me. And it's like, it loses some mystery, I guess, in a sense. And it also makes it, like, more obvious. But versus if you're being more mysterious, like, hey, I need your phone. And she doesn't know if you need her phone for, her, because you think she's interesting, because she thinks or because you think she's hot, because maybe you actually need to, like, ask her about something in, like, a academic sense, which obviously, like, nobody, like, hey, can I have your phone? Like, no, you're a freaking superior man, bro. You guys watch this, you should know better. You are way smarter than this. Make it a little more creative. So anyway, it's such a basic level, bro. So, obviously, if you're a millionaire and you're just like, hey, I think you're cute, well, of course, yeah, you're a millionaire. Like, she just knows, you want to fuck her. But make it a little more creative. You guys are smart. You watch this stuff. I see, yeah, and yeah, straighten up. Yeah, he straightened up, bro. But, caught you. Let me know if I caught you. But so anyway, I started talking, and after that is where guys get stumbled, because they're like, well, what do I talk about with her? Well, passion. Passion is what we use. Use passion. You know what I started talking? I started talking about masculinity and how, like, I think America is, degenerating. As bad as it sounds, it's like this toxic, red pill content. She was intrigued. She's like, well, I want to move to, I think it was Bucharest or Budapest. I think it's Budapest, but freaking Angela. She wanted to move somewhere. I'm like, I want to move out of here too. And we started talking how there's no culture in America, how it's like, and it might not be true, it might not be true, but I was just so passionate, and I was just, because I was passionate about it myself. So that passionate, it got contagious. It's contagious. So it got, like, absorbed into her. So then she also became passionate, and it's just instant chemistry. It's kind of like that stuff. So, and it doesn't have to be true again, like, obviously there's cultured people in America. But I was like, yeah, well, when I grow up, I want to move to Dagestan. I want to be, like, have a house there, potentially. And it's just a good conversation starter. But again, you don't have to be passionate with just girls. You can be passionate, like, in a business setting. Let's say you come in, and you're like, sir, I want to work all the time. This is, like, my most important job. Let's say it's a corporate job, for example. And you're like, I want to, work here because I really... Don't say, like, bullshit, like, oh yeah, I love this job, I like the employment opportunities or something. Like, but be like, I'm really passionate, I want to work, like, be, like, I want to get this stuff, like, let's get it, like, give me, or you can do it, like, calmly. You can say, have that, like, cold-blooded approach where, like, I do anything, I do anything. You give me anything, I do it. I terminate every task. and you just like glare at them. Well, I know, I'm kidding. Don't do that, bro. Don't do that. But you get it. So like, versus a guy who comes into work and he's like, you know, I would just like to get a job. Just stares, like looks at the side. Like, I was like, oh yeah. Like, what is that? Doesn't give anything to the employer. You have to, you know, if you get hired for a job, you have to solve the employer's problems, not make him new problems. Again, like just as a sign off, but you can use passion, a lot of it. And think about it. Think about all the influential figures. Think about Tate. Think about maybe presidents. Well, except Joe Biden, not Joe Biden, but every president speaks with passion. Like Putin. Think about Putin. Now he has a different type of like he's not like, yo, let's go. You know, like he's more like, yes, we do this, and he's like, we'll stay strong. It's kind of hard to explain. Maybe if you're Russian, it's like a different passion. It's like, you know, like, let's go, like, we never bend. You know, Russians never surrender. It's that type of passion. But there's also other, like, you know, writing, Robespierre, all those influential guys. Everything is passion. Good leaders have passion. Super key takeaway. Honestly, I think this point in itself already boosts like half the stuff on how to win friends and influence people. It equalizes it. If not, it's better. But you guys are probably thinking like, that's basic, and that is basic. So let's dive in deeper. This is what I wanted to talk about. So the core, now we're getting like the juice. So number one is three things. So number one is emotional. This is when you basically appeal to an emotion of an audience. You touch the heart. So remember James Clear? He wrote Atomic Habits, that book, which I really don't know if I need to do a review on it because it's just such a popular book. But if you start reading that book, the first few pages, he talks about how he was a child and he broke his head or something, or he got like hit in the head with a ball, his like skull fell out or something, or her brains fell. I like, again, not being like mean or anything, but it was super emotionally touching. That's an example of being passionately emotional. There we go. Easy. It's a story, you know, like I can say how like what happened, like I have a finger that I broke in a train, and I can say like, you know, when I was a little guy, like, and I would say, you know, it was bad, that stuff, you know, your stories about, for example, being rejected or something, that's all emotional. Then you have the novel. So the novel, what that means is it teaches you something new. So that's an intellectual lecture. So for example, the fact that, let's say somebody says your water is infested with BPAs, or I'm sorry, not BPAs, it's infested with hormones from, you know, women's birth control when they you know, use it, and it goes down the toilet, and it goes in the, sometimes it leaks in the system of, you know, your well, it does leak in your sewage system, but then sometimes it also leaks in your actual sinks, and it doesn't get filtered because hormones are super small, so they're hard to get filtered. Now if you want to know more about this, check out the estrogen guide. I have this on the channel. You'll boost your testosterone, and every like cancer problems, you'll minimize everything. Just a plug-in. I'm sorry guys, but anyway, next is we have the third thing. So the third is we have our appeal to like memory. So your sense of, you know, like, whoa, I remember that. So let's say you had a presentation like Bill Gates. He did a TED Talk, and this was an example in the book. So he did a TED Talk where he came with a little glass of mosquitoes, and he says, you know, people in Africa get malaria. So he says, why do people in Africa and poor people have to get malaria? Why doesn't everybody get malaria? So he opens the jar and lets those malaria-infested mosquitoes fly everywhere. Obviously, they weren't infested with mosquitoes, but the guys in the audience were like, whoa, no, oh my God, you know? So it's really interesting, and I'll prove something to you. Negative emotions, if you do this, negative emotions have a stronger appeal than positive emotions. And you might be like, no, they don't. I'll prove to you. Imagine, I'll give you two examples. Number one, let's say, imagine you are at work in a corporate job. Somebody praises you. They say, good job, man. Nice work. Like, you know, and he says like, you're gonna be doing great. You know, I'll maybe like, you're a hardworking guy, you know, I see you, maybe I'll recommend you or something. You're like, okay, I'm happy. And then imagine you're doing the same thing, and somebody comes over and they say like, come on, you gotta work faster. You're being a piece of, you know, like you gotta get this up. Come on, man, speed. You gotta be more hustling. You can't do this. You can't just lying around. Come on, hurry up, man. Look, see, everybody's working. Like, you know, you gotta get this stuff. Come on. It's more intimidating and it's more scary because number one, you're closer to getting fired. You know, you might be scared. Whoa, what if I get fired? Number two is it evolved from our emotional needs. So the second example, let's say you had a really good day, like, you know, your family, let's say perfect example. Your family's, everything's going well. You know, let's say you bought flowers for your mother. You got like, I don't know, you took your dad to like play billiards or something. Or maybe not even, let's just say you bought like a cake. You bought a cake and your family praises you. They're like, thank you. That's good. But then an even stronger emotion, and it's a negative emotion. So let's say you wake up and you forgot to like take out the trash. Let's say you forgot to, I don't know, do something you didn't do, like, you know, you gotta mow a lawn or something like that. Did I say that? Mow a lawn? Lawn a mow? Mow a lawn, yeah, I think we got it. So, stuff like that. It's a much deeper, because then you're like, damn it, I didn't get this. You know, now I feel bad because my family doesn't like me. Versus, yeah, you feel good when you get praised, but then it fades away. Versus, you know, you get in a negative altercation, you don't feel good. It's because of our survival instinct. We usually interpret positive stuff as good, but if we have something negative, that's closer to us being dying. So let's say if we're in a cave as a primal man, there's some threat, there's an animal who's about to come in, we're scared as hell. We need to protect against that animal, or else we're gonna die. Now let's say we had our crops grow. We had excess amount of crops. We would feel good that we have more crops. But we would feel even worse, and we would have more emotion if our crops didn't grow as well as we thought, because then, again, it makes it more difficult to survive, so we get more possibilities of dying. And when we get more possibilities of dying, we feel worse. Hope that makes sense, guys. But anyway, so we have those three. And let's say it's better if you activate all three. So with the example of that girl, when I was talking to her, I activated a lot of the stuff. So emotional, let's go ahead through one. So you can obviously do one or the other, but it's better if you hit all three. That's like a jackpot. That's when you know, hit a ball in pool, like it's perfect. You get like 2 balls at a time or something. So emotional appeal. So did I appeal to her emotionally? Well, I did. You know why? Because in the modern generation, it's really rare some guy even like stands up and like talks to you and even gets your number. It's crazy rare, guys. And you might think like, well, there's a lot of cold approaches. No, there's not. Most of the people who approach girls, other way around, I gotta admit, like, there's girls who, you know, approach me in a sense. Like, it happens through social media oftentimes. You could be sitting on a toilet being like, yo, you know, I found her on Insta. Now, I don't recommend, again, don't use Insta. Insta is not good, it's bad for your mental health. You know, any social media, but you guys should know this. I'm not even gonna, that's basic points. Other people can talk about it. But let's say you get something on Insta, you're like on the toilet, yo, this girl is hot. You message something on Insta, bang, you know, you're in conversation. She sees your profile, you see her profile, but nobody really walks up. Nobody has the balls, like dushko. Not a lot of people has dushko to really walk over and like just start talking to her. That's an emotional appeal. That automatically makes it sort of memorable. Because, well, let's go in the novel first. So I'll get to the memorable aspect in a little bit later. But the novel aspect, so, well, with her, she learned that I'm from Russia, that I'm a cultured man, that I speak a different language, for example, that relates to her. Now again, that kind of ties into emotional. But also she realized that, and it's memorable. She's like, well, you know, I don't meet a lot of guys who are from, you know, Europe, because she's obviously from Europe too. Hungary's in Europe, guys. Well, you know that, come on, yeah, geography. You guys ace geography, I know it. But no, I'm kidding. In her mind, she's like, well, I'm from Europe too, so it's memorable. It's like, you know, maybe let's say, okay, maybe I hit 2 of those, you know, I hit the emotional and memorable, but that's still good. Now, listen very closely. Successful people can't wait to share their ideas. This gives them charisma. Charisma, it is the amount of passion a person has for a specific subject. Again, I'll repeat this. Charisma is the amount of passion an individual has for a specific subject. Super important. Let's look at an example, because charisma is something that makes you follow. It's something, I think Robert Greene wrote this in one of his, I think it was 48 Laws of Power. What made people follow Napoleon, Robespierre, you know, even like Hitler, even, you know, bad leaders? It's charisma, and, you know, it's not good, obviously, but they did possess charisma. Now, there's good people who possess charisma. Martin Luther King, he possessed a lot of charisma. I guess in that same realm, what was his name? Malcolm X, he possessed charisma. Presidents possess charisma. Donald Trump possessed charisma. You know, Hamza possesses charisma. The guys you follow, Robert Kiyosaki, he has charisma in his own way. So there's a test done. that showed, it had basically charismatic people who scored, you know, high in the charismatic scale, and you can test it pretty easily, you know, like a lot of this, like, again, passion, it's all, but there's a way to test that. So people who scored high in the charisma test were sat next to the low charismatic people, and guess what? What do you think happened? The people who were charismatic were able to raise the moods of the non-charismatic people just because they shared that charisma. That's crazy. That's why you feel motivated when you watch some kind of inspirational speech, when you watch your hero speak, because you're the low charismatic person in that case. He's the high charismatic. Now let's think about, well, what is a low charismatic person? Let's say a presenter. I had again, the same situation. I'm studying and I'm looking at a lecture. There's a lecture. This guy, he comes in, he's like this chubby, you know, Mexican guy. Like, again, I'm not saying like Mexicans, there's really good guys. I like nothing against Mexicans, you know, but he was just a fat guy. He was kind of like, you know, like he was talking his really not a lot, like super basic speaker, just reiterate the content, like bleh, like here you go, bleh, like the content, like nothing really. He just praised you, but it was that stupid like cheap praise, you know. It was like, bro, like shut the like, you know, like it was not good. In fact, it was actually kind of repulsing in a way. It was not a lot of charisma. And even though he was a good speaker, he was educated, he was trained, you know, in terms of the subject he was speaking in. And like he was speaking, it was some stupid subject too, bro. It was like career pathways or something. It was nonsense. It was like a come-in speaker, you know, like it wasn't an actual, like he would just come in, he's been like, yeah, I've been doing this for 8 years. I'm like, oh, it doesn't look like it, bro, not for 8 years. So like, it's stupid. But then you have this other guy, in comparison, a guy who's on YouTube, you can find him. I used to really look at him because when he had really good science content, like endocrine system. His name is, I think, Dr. Matt and Dr. Mike. And Dr. Mike, I think more specifically, this guy, perfect example of a charismatic person. You look at him, he give you a science presentation. Now he was built like this guy. He wore, you know, those black t-shirts. He had his hair all done. He had it like, not, you know, like makeup, but he had it like, you know, combed everything, good jawline, muscles, all that stuff, and he was educated. So he gave science lectures, and the science lectures were at the top of their game, bro. I gotta say that. And what also added to that spice was his physical presence, charisma. He would turn around on the board, so he would like turn around as he would write the notes on the whiteboard, and you could see the definitions of his rotator cuff muscles. Now, your rotator cuff, in case you don't know, that's like your muscle a little bit above it's below the shoulder, but above your lat. So his rotator cuff muscles, they would just like, boom, like stick out. It was like a boxer's, you know, like when they box and you see those muscles on the back. His rotator cuff was puffing out. His, you know, back was huge. His bicep was popping out, and he was just calm and collected. And this guy, he spoke facts, bro. He spoke facts. This is an example of charisma. He didn't even speak enthusiastically, but there was an aura around him that made you think like, damn, like that's a man, you know, like this is who I want to be when I grow up, like as a, you know, from a kid's perspective. It's stuff like that. And compare him with the other speaker. Again, he's more physically appealing, and he's also smart. And he knows how to, you know, summon charisma. So it's stuff like that. Speaking in you have to find a style. He had a really good style. He was mega charismatic. And maybe you maybe watch him. I don't know if he had like some science lecture. But anyway, so you can't really influence people. And this is a great example of you can't really influence people unless you're passionate and you love what you do. In a sense, like not like this boy, like, oh, be a scientist, you know, be a freaking a nutritionist, be something that makes you happy. No. I mean like, you're genuinely happy about it. Like when Dr. Mike talks about science, you can tell he really likes that stuff because it makes his brain work. He actually feels happy and he feels like it's a useful thing to talk about. When the fat guy came in, he didn't really give a damn, you know? He didn't care. You could tell, I could see it in his eyes. He had a family he had to take care of. He didn't give a single tit about like all the dudes that are sitting in the audience, you know? And I hope I don't give that vibe. Like, I hope I really, like, I truly kind of want to put a lot of knowledge out there. So, I really don't want to be like that guy. And you shouldn't be like that guy, too. You're probably not if you're thinking about this stuff. You probably aren't like that guy. But you can see in some people, like, okay, he's like, I just want to go back to my family, I want to pay my bills, get my stuff, you know. The other guy, completely different story. So you have to be passionate. Think about Donald Trump. Donald Trump, this guy is passionate about what he does. Do you think if he just sat there and like, I don't know if I want to buy this. I don't know if I want to buy this piece of real estate. I don't know if I want. No, he's like, I like this. I read a book about him. I read a book. He was talking about that book, how he feels like each sort of place he bought, he kind of had a vision. He was like a painter, or I think he said it like a sculptor or an artist. He kind of envisioned it. He was passionate. He wasn't like passionate about, you know, the cement, but he was passionate about what he could turn that place into. He's like, yo, you know, this is a plaza in New York. I can really make this shine. It sparked in him, and he had charisma. It gave him charisma. He did that stuff. He painted the building how he wanted to paint it. And that's what made him such a good entrepreneur. Obviously, you know, he had other, like, he was pretty rich and wealthy, but it gave him that extra zest. Another insane statistic, that this is why I love this book so much. There's statistics here that are crazy, that you can't access in, like, you know, your standard, like, books on speaking, that are like, there's a statistic here that says your brain, the size of your brain, it increases the more public speaking you do. Think how crazy that is. Your brain gets bigger. You get big brain, bro. You like, it's the same with music and the same with sports, which I also was, I mean, I was aware, but I wasn't aware that speaking actually does this. So I think it's your it's not the hypothalamus, it's a structure in your brain. I'm not sure, I'll maybe list it on the screen, but it increases in size the more public speaking you do. So your brain size increases with the amount you speak. Think of how insane that is. You can double, like, you can expand your brain just by speaking more. And in terms of speaking, well, who do you speak with? And that's a big question. Like, a lot of guys, you know, you don't speak with people who are dumbasses. Please, I'm a huge advocate to speak people who are older than you. I always say that. Speak with people who are older than you, because they know more. They are, especially, you know, if you're an intellectual, like you guys are watching this, a lot of the guys who are, you know, younger, there are some good young guys, but it's hard to find. The older you get, usually the more intelligent people become, because they just see life, you know, life slaps them. They're like, they're not aware of this. They get slapped, they get knocked down. They're like, oh, that hurt, you know. So, and they get more, like, I say maybe, like, for me, it doesn't have to be crazy, but like a year or two older than you. That's what I like to do. And I gain so much knowledge from that stuff. So much knowledge from just speaking to people who are older than me. Because it puts me on their level. So I'm a young guy, but I think on their level. So when I get to their level, I'm already kind of aware of what's coming, and I've prepared. Again, it's all life setup. That's a whole new topic. You can check out videos. I think Firstman makes good videos on life setup, but this is kind of like part of life setup. It leads to this stuff. So speak to older guys, and there's some young guys, like, you know, there's guys on my level who I like to talk to. Well, specifically, it's like one guy. He's a really good friend. Like, he's a super good friend. Like, he's not like some, you know, random guy. Like, he's a hard guy. Like, he's a, like, brother type. But it's just one dude out of, you know, all the people I meet, which is like, you know, hundreds. All right, so next hole, I want to talk about storytelling. Storytelling is something very interesting because it's similar to passion, but it's also something, it's another big key part of speaking, being a good speaker. Number one, storytelling is like taking people on a field trip with you. So that's kind of the definition I guess I go by, is it helps you connect better with the reader. It makes it like burns this bridge, or I guess it makes a bridge in a sense. But it burns the bridge of unfamiliarity and builds the bridge of familiarity, and in this case you want familiarity, so it's a good bridge. You build it and you connect with the reader. And a lot of brands, a lot of individuals use stories. And I'll do a book soon, a review on complete, like, just storytelling. So I think it's called like Storyword. There's a few books on storytelling, but I'll see a good one. So basically, think of a YouTuber you watch. They use stories, and remember this guy Hamza, he used a lot of stories, and what's funny about that is he also used animations. He used animations to go along with the story. That is crazy for your dopamine receptors, because when you see a story that's already good and you feel, you know, a lot of dopamine kicking in, and when you see funny animations with that, that's even more of a hook. It's like watching a movie, you know? Remember when you were a kid and you couldn't like whoa, you're just staring at a movie like this, I don't know what you watch, like Simpsons, or what movies were back then? I don't even know, like SpongeBob or something, and you would just watch it and you'd be like, you know, like, you couldn't take your eyes off. It's very similar. It's a story going along with an animation. Super, super cool. And overall, like let's say in a field of, so in my business of like, window cleaning, let's say this, I walk up to a customer, I approach the customer, I say, hello, Mrs. Johns, or Mr. Johns. And instead of saying, well, let me just clean your windows, you have a dirty window, you got a house. Instead, if you say, wow, I like your windows, those windows, I had the exact same shape that I cleaned like a while ago. And they were very specific. It's like, my grandparents back then had like these windows. And you start on these conversations, or you start to say some story about, how, I mean, in this case, it doesn't even have to be like a true story. If you're really desperate and you need sales, you can just make up a story, I guess. But that's not very, I guess, authentic. But if you have an authentic story, that's even better. So you say like, whoa, when I first started, I was looking and they were so hard to clean. And then like now they're the most perfected windows I've ever done. And put some example of how you were like struggling to clean a window. Like, you're getting pressured, you had to go on a different call, you got something, this going on. And when you do this, like let's say you got some call that you had to go on, that you had like clean the windows and you had to get them inside and outside, and somebody came in and they like sprayed water on them and you had to redo everything, and you were stressful and you were already like hyped, and somebody was calling in, and then your friend got in a car crash or something and it was a horrible day and you were scared. And then it gets a much better understanding between you and the person you're trying to sell to. It's a lot of important stuff. Even somebody who's, you're trying to sell something else, for example, like if it's a property. And notice I was telling you a story as I was telling a story. So like, when I was describing all the stuff, it kind of got your like, your interest peaked a little bit. You gotta admit it. You started like, kind of like, whoa, that's a interesting stuff that could have happened. Like, whoa, did that really happen? No, you get interested. Again, that bridge forms. And you can use that, as individuals. That's a good example. Companies also use this. So for example, let's go even deeper. We have 3 sort of story types. So you have number 1, which is a personal story. This is a good story. You have the stories of you've heard somewhere else, for example, stories of other people. And then you have 3rd, which is the stories of success and failures. 3 types. Let's go into number 1 even deeper. Let's discuss personal stories. Personal stories are basically stories of yourself. I mean, obviously. Duh. So Hamza, he used a lot of personal stories. Personal stories, the more detailed they are, the better it is. So for example, like when he would talk about some like thing that happened, like he talked about some personal stuff, and that's crazy, like stuff that I wouldn't even talk about, a lot of people wouldn't talk about, maybe eventually, but he would talk about, like having gynecomastia, talk about having, like varicocele, like that stuff, and it helps you connect with the audience so much deeper, because number 1 is it shows that the person is, he's kind of like you, he's not some god who's like, whoa, this is a celebrity. No, he kind of shows like, well, I'm vulnerable just like you. And 2, it shows that the person is fearless. Fearlessness is the key in personal storytelling. And I think in life, 2 general principles. Hard work, how to be successful in life. Hard work is principle number 1. You work hard, obviously, you have to, even if you are rich, you still have to work hard. You think Donald Trump didn't work hard? You think he didn't lose stress and, and the time and the resources when he was trying to, like, buy close a big deal? No, of course he did. It might have been easier than in some cases, but he still put a lot of effort into it, hard work. And 2 is fearlessness. Fearlessness is super important. I will do a book review. 50 Cent and Robert Greene, when they collaborated, they had a few amazing books. The 2 books about fearlessness I recommend anybody read is 50th Law of Power by 50 Cent and Robert Greene, and Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter. But 50 Cent's philosophy on the rapper I'm talking about, in case you guys haven't heard. He's a very smart guy. Again, if you look at his philosophy on fearlessness, it's super, super interesting. And I will probably review that later. But fearlessness, because if you do hard work, and let's say you get in a big job opportunity, you work hard, you get like promoted. And then if you're scared to ask for a raise because you're not confident, then what the hell is the point of your hard work? Same in real life. Let's say you're hardworking, and I can see this on my dad, like my stepdad. Very hardworking guys, like that Soviet professor type. And I guess he was like, you could say part of the brain drain, like from Soviet Union to America. But hardworking guy, man, but like just never takes risks, Like I guess it's, you can say, well, it's a lot of like stuff he had to go through. But again, it's like, it depends on the person, because a lot of immigrant parents I know do this. So if you have an immigrant parent, I bet, like, tell me, and don't lie, are they usually all about taking risks? You know, not even big risks, like investing in stocks, maybe investing like in some, buying a piece of real estate or something, and doing like some other stuff. It's like stuff where you can lose money. It usually is not like that. They're like, well, I want to stay away from stocks. I don't want any of that nonsense. Nah, I'm good. Like, why not? Because it's fearlessness. And same with, like, I see a lot of young guys, not even young guys, I see a lot of old guys who are like in the job setting. See it all the time. Like the places I work, they'll be saying like, whoa, you know, I'm working, super hard working guys. But they're just always like scared. It's like, well, what if I lose my job? Who cares, bro? Like, bro, it's capitalism. If it's not like some big job, if it's some normal, you know, middle income job, like, you know, some food store or some, you know, beginner job, who cares if you lose that job, bro? Nobody cares. It's capitalism, bro. Let's say, okay, let's give a personal example. So for me, let's say you work at Costco, you get fired from Costco. There's still Walmart, Sam's Club, there's Marshall's, there's Ross, there's Chick-fil-A, there's McDonald's, there's Hooters, I don't know, there's like freaking Target, there's so many stores, millions, and I'm not even talking about the private stores like Dan's Cookie Club. There's millions of those. Do you really think you're not going to be able to find a job as like a full able-bodied person? Of course you will, you know? It's stupid. Like, don't be fearless, or don't be be fearful. Be fearless. Don't, like, really think about it. Hard work and fearlessness. Now, again, excuse the rant, but personal stories do require fearlessness. Fearlessness is super important. How would you maybe implement these personal stories? Because wouldn't you forget them? Well, yes, of course. What I do personally, and I think a lot of people do this too, maybe YouTubers specifically, when they have a thought in their mind, what I would do is I take my phone, I open the Notes app, and I have a specific section that says thoughts or ideas. And I would just literally put a bullet point, jot it down. Jot down the note that I had in my head. So for example, you know, let's say I see some guy being, you know, driven by a girl in a car. Now again, like, it depends, like, nothing wrong, but it's just like, and then they get out, and then, you know, the girl pays for the guy, and it's like, well, what the hell is this? So, and it kind of like gives me thoughts in my brain. I'll be like, you know, I'll think of some concepts I thought before of, and I don't want to forget these concepts. So then I jot them down. I jot them down on a notepad, and I know a lot of people, for example, who lecture, they do that, and stuff like that. You know, it's pretty simple. Keep that. You will use them in your future presentations. No matter where you gotta present, you can just, if you want to be passionate, because remember, we have to be passionate. This is how we show our passion, by remembering the thoughts and properly telling stories about our passions in any presentation, school, you know, college, even at a job setting. If you're giving presentations that are full of passion and good stories, that's a win. Next, we have the stories of other people, and so abstractions are not liked by most people. So what stories of other people do is they take those abstract concepts and they break them into emotional, tangible, and memorable sort of ideas that people can understand. So let's say, like, the First Man, this is a good example. First Man, the YouTuber, really good guy. He created a concept called like the male advantage, and he did it from a lot of other, you know, stuff. So he kind of looked around, he looked at men around him, he saw, you know, what's the sort of I guess median of those ideas, and he just came up with that. And you know, he just made this concept of the male advantage. So he took a bunch of abstract concepts and made it into a simple male advantage theory. Then we have people like, you know, Tony Robbins, which a lot of you guys know more. And he basically, like, when he comes up on stage and he says, you know, well, this guy came up to me on Monday and he told me this, and I told him this. Like, it's, so you use other people for, you know, your benefit in a sense. So stories of other people, and I guess you can make them up too. I mean, I don't know if a guy came up to him on Monday, you know, like, again, don't be so naive. Like, obviously a lot of those guys just make up stories, but it really depends. Like, so you can use that. And finally, you have a super good one, probably the best one out of here, which again, like, I kind of like because I think it's just super clever. It's, again, stories of successes and failures. And this is a really good one. So a lot of companies use this one. Super cool. And I'll give you a super nice example that you might understand. So stories of this success and failure types. So you have advertisements that basically show a product, and they show this product of more specifically how it's made. So the success is behind that product, how this product was made. And because when you buy something, you obviously will be more inclined to buy this product if you know more about the product. It's common sense, if you really think about it. I've heard this ad so many times on Spotify when I'd be, training at the gym maybe, and then you have this like Lay's potato chips, and it's like grown in, like in this case it's Florida, so it'd be like grown in Florida potato chips, or I think more exactly it's like, let me use my super smart memory. I'll turn back, I'll rewind it. No, I still can't remember, but it was something in the realm of like Lay's potato chips are grown in farms closer than you might think. And then it says like Florida farmers grew over 6 billion potatoes chips or whatever the heck it is. So for Lay's, obviously. And when you think about that, I'm like, whoa, now I see what they did. So they took, and now you see what they did too, because you guys see this, right? So they took the concepts of behind, the success of the Lay's potato chip brand, and they described it even further. And it's like, well, maybe if I was in Alabama, they would say like, oh, Alabama farmers, they did this. But you can adjust it to a different state. So in Florida, they'll say, Florida farmers grew a lot of potatoes. So you think, well, whoa, potatoes, that's good. They're coming here, so they're not some imported potatoes from, some other country. That means it must be healthy. And then you are more inclined to buy more potato chips just because you thought of that. Keep that in mind. Now, we know the story types. Let's go deeper. So something that school might have taught us, which, again, not everybody. I'll put on a chart. There's a thing called ethos, logos, and pathos. So what are they? You guys probably know them. In case you don't know them, I'll just quickly explain. So it's, ethos is your credibility. So like, Bill Gates is going to be more credible to talk about money than some hobo off the street, so he has more ethos. Logos, logic. So logic and logos, basically, how logical is your argument or your presentation. And then pathos, the way you can remember is like, I think of a python. So when a python eats you or he constricts you, then you get scared. That's emotion. So pathos is emotion. In your stories, check this out. Most of the story should be pathos. It should be mostly emotion. Now again, it's different for business stories because if you're doing a financial report, you don't really need a lot of emotion in there, though it is helpful, but it's going to be more logic based and credibility based. But this is the chart that a lot of speakers follow in a TED program, and they get really good results because our brain, once again, it likes that stuff. And what school didn't teach us, in fact, it's the fact that our brain, researchers, they showed that our brains are more active when we hear stories, when we hear things like pathos, emotion. When we hear that stuff, our brain turns on. Same thing about Hamza. So when in the beginning of his YouTube career, he would do these animations about, Jeffrey and Adonis, he would have, the dopamine receptors, and your brain would get more stimulated. So you go like boom, and it goes all throughout your body, it vibrates, it goes like through your neurons in your brain, neuron to neuron, neuron to neuron. It passes through those passages, it goes through your body, sending out an appropriate message to where it needs to go. And of course, in the process, it turns into hormones, all that complicated stuff. But on average, that's kind of how it rolls. And then finally, let's conclude storytelling. I want to finish strong in terms of, finally, you have to arouse the senses of the person you're talking to. So, because you can tell really good stories, but if they don't really touch the person, now again, like everything we've discussed about stories, you probably will to an extent, but how specifically, even better, you can touch a person is, please use metaphors and analogies. So use exaggerations, use something, maybe a little humor, humor we'll get to in a second, maybe part 2, but use analogies. Stuff that, a little bit extreme. Like, why do you think, Donald Trump is so famous? Well, when he told stories, he was also exaggerating a little bit. A lot of people do that. For example, Tate, why did he become popular? Well, he would exaggerate a lot of the stuff. Like, I would say maybe, 70 to 80% of the stuff he exaggerates on. And it serves him well, and it will serve you well, and me well. And so, again, like, you guys are not dumbasses, so if you use the stories correctly, and you implement more metaphors. And another thing is, if you don't keep them cliche, please don't say cliche examples. I don't know who said that, but I think it might have been a professor or something, but he said if you've heard a saying used once, don't ever use that saying. Keep your reader, or I'm sorry, your listener, the person you're trying to communicate information to, more engaged. So say, spark things up a little, go like boom, you get like that that impassion, passion of you're trying to persuade on, like that whole thing we're talking about in terms of like confidence and just general passion. The way you do this is, again, you avoid cliches, don't use that, and it takes courage too. So it takes courage to simplify your stories. This is a very good point. I've not thought about this yet. So use courage. This is a really good book, and it mentioned that you need to use courage. And what I didn't think about personally, a lot of people probably don't think about this, but you'll know now because you've watched this. If you've watched this to the end, you get really good knowledge now. It takes courage in order to simplify your stories, in order to make them less broad, in order to make them simpler. And it helps your reader, or your listener, the person you're communicating information to understand you better. Because now everything is a lot more simpler. And it takes, again, courage to condense a story. Same way it takes courage to, tell a story in the matter of a few seconds versus a few minutes. 40-second story will probably have more, with a lot of spice, will be a lot more intriguing, it will be a lot more memorable. It will be a lot more all that stuff we talked about than a story that lasts maybe, a few minutes and maybe is not as juicy. So stuff like that. But again, another thing is, finally I'll leave you off, we'll talk about a lot more concepts. Now, I'll leave you off, we'll talk a lot about more concepts. To conclude this, I want to say be authentic. This is a key part. You have to be authentic. Develop a sort of style in yourself. You can look at other speakers, look at who you like, in terms of, I don't know, maybe like the way Barack Obama speaks, the way Donald Trump speaks, the way Jordan Peterson speaks, the way, I don't know, somebody else speaks. Take them and kind of combine them into your own style. That's going to help you a lot, because this is really good advice. Condense them into a style that will be good for you. It doesn't even have to be a famous person, someone you like, the way they speak, and take their style and just make it yours. Make it yours, because that's the way they learned. That's the way their fathers learned. They looked at other people speak, they interpreted the speech, the way they speak, the manners, the gestures they use, and they just came up with their own gestures. Same with you. Do the same thing. You will be a great speaker one day. Now, bro, if you want to learn how to use humor in your speeches and why your presentations or speeches should be 18 minutes long, which is something I will start incorporating, you'll see this, and more, then see you in the next and final video on this book and topic. Salam alaikum, bratan.